Chosen one. Listen carefully. Heaven fell silent because of what you finally did. The very moment you stood when no one expected you to, heaven itself paused. The sound of worship faded for a breath, and every angel turned to witness what you, the one who was never supposed to rise again, had just done. It wasn't a miracle performed in the open. It was obedience born in the dark. You have no idea how long heaven has watched your journey. Every time you wiped your tears in silence, every night you whispered prayers, no one heard, heaven recorded them. You thought your steps were small, but in the spirit they sounded like thunder. You thought your choices were ordinary, but they carried eternal weight. There was a time when you almost gave up, when you were certain that your voice didn't matter anymore. Yet something inside refused to die. Even in silence, your spirit whispered, "I still believe." That whisper was louder than the enemy's roar. Heaven leaned in close and said, "Watch this one rise." The word of the Lord speaks in the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 16. "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to bear fruit that will last." That truth is the foundation of this moment. You didn't stumble into purpose, you were chosen for it. Before your first breath, before your first failure, heaven already placed your name in the scroll of destiny. And today, that scroll glows again, because you have done what few dare to do. You obeyed. Heaven wasn't shocked because you succeeded. Heaven was shocked because you believed again, against every reason to quit. You believed, against the pain that told you to stop. You chose to move forward. You didn't do it for applause. You did it because something divine inside whispered, "Now." And when you moved, you aligned with heaven's heartbeat. Do you know what happens when a chosen one finally steps into obedience? Chains begin to rattle. Regions begin to shift. Angels take new positions. Your yes sends orders across realms. The darkness that stalked you suddenly trembles, realizing it has lost its hold. Because when you obey, you no longer operate as a victim, you walk as a vessel. This is what heaven saw. A warrior in human skin, standing up from ashes. A voice that had been silenced by pain, now echoing through eternity. You didn't just stand, you declared that your story will not end in defeat. Heaven watched in awe because your decision altered timelines. You may not feel powerful right now, but listen, faith is not a feeling. It is movement against resistance. It is light choosing to burn in the cold. You did not need validation. Your obedience was your announcement. Heaven took notice. Even now, angels are moving on your behalf. What once was delayed is being accelerated. The same hands that held you through loss are now preparing to crown you in victory. You are stepping into a season where your scars become proof, not pain. Every tear you cried was currency for this breakthrough. Chosen one, you are entering the part of your story where heaven turns silence into song. You have been through enough to know that obedience costs everything, but disobedience costs destiny. And you chose destiny. You chose the narrow road. That is why heaven gasped. That is why the earth will soon witness what heaven already knows. You are unstoppable. Take this as your sign you have heaven's attention. The weight you feel is not pressure, it is power forming within you. You are not the same person who doubted, who hesitated. You are transformed by the fire that tried to consume you. You have emerged from darkness, carrying light that cannot be hidden. Now it is time to let that light speak. Lift your head. The heavens are waiting for your next step. You don't need permission. You have divine commission. Heaven's silence was not absence. It was awe. It was reverence for the moment when prophecy met obedience, and you became the fulfillment. If these words find your heart, don't keep them in silence. Like this message, share it so others may awaken to their call. Subscribe to stay connected to every word heaven releases through this flow. And as an act of faith, seal this moment by commenting the prophetic number 777 below. You have stepped into divine history, and heaven now writes your name in light. The echo of your obedience will not fade, it will multiply. Stand firm, for this is only the beginning of glory, unfolding through you. The one heaven calls unstoppable. You have carried a weight that few could ever understand. Every smile you forced, every battle you fought in silence, heaven saw it all. You learned how to walk with invisible bruises, how to speak life, even when your own soul was starving for it. The world saw strength, heaven saw survival. You have been through seasons where your prayers seemed to echo against stone, where every door you knocked on refused to open. Yet even then, something sacred kept you standing. You never gave yourself enough credit for how far you've come. You kept moving when your heart was fractured. You kept showing up when everything in you screamed to disappear. And what you did not know was that heaven kept score not to condemn you, but to honor your endurance. There were days when your faith was hanging by a thread, but even that thread was woven with gold. The angels whispered about you in the corridors of heaven, still standing, still faithful, still believing. You were not merely surviving, you were being sculpted. The weight you carried was not punishment, it was preparation. Each disappointment taught you discernment. Each heartbreak refined your heart for compassion. The very things that broke you also built you. You learned to hear God in silence, to trust Him without proof, and to love Him without condition. Heaven calls that kind of endurance holy. There were moments you questioned whether God had forgotten you. You wondered why others seemed to advance while you stood still. But the truth is, you were never behind. You were hidden for protection. The delay was divine, designed to grow your roots deeper before the storm could pull you out of place. When the winds came, others toppled. But you, though wounded, remained planted. The Lord saw you carrying weight that wasn't yours to bear. And still, you refused to curse His name. You prayed through exhaustion. You forgave when it hurt. You gave when you had little left to give. Heaven counted every act of quiet obedience as worship. That is why you are still here. That is why you still have breath, because heaven refused to let your purpose die under pressure. Sometimes strength looks like holding on to a whisper. Sometimes it's not shouting victory, but whispering, God, I trust you. Through tears, you have done that countless times. Each time you did, heaven took note. You thought no one saw the nights you cried yourself to sleep. But the one who neither slumbers nor sleeps was right there, collecting your tears as evidence of faith. The weight you carried alone was not in vain. It trained you to recognize the voice of heaven in a noisy world. You now carry wisdom that cannot be taught, only lived. Every wound became a doorway to deeper revelation. You learned that brokenness is not the absence of God's presence. It's often where He is closest. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. Chapter 31. Verse 16, restrain your voice from weeping, and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, says the Lord. That is the message heaven sends to you now. The years of labor, of unseen faithfulness, of silent endurance, they have not been forgotten. Every step you took under that weight was writing your testimony. Every yes you gave while carrying burdens that could have broken you became a seed of glory. Heaven was not indifferent to your suffering. It was interceding for your strength. The moments when you thought you were alone were the very moments angels surrounded you. The reason you are still standing is because heaven refused to let the burden crush you completely. The weight was great, but the anointing forming beneath it was greater. Now you understand why certain people could not go where you were going. They were not built for your assignment. The weight was specifically measured for your shoulders. You may have felt weak, but heaven called you resilient. You may have felt forgotten, but heaven called you chosen. What once was heaviness is now holiness. The same pain that once crushed you has become proof that you were never ordinary. Your scars are not signs of defeat, they are sacred signatures of endurance. And soon, the world will see what heaven already knows, that the one who carried the heaviest load has been entrusted with the greatest glory. So breathe. The weight is lifting. The season of carrying alone is ending. The same heaven that watched you suffer in silence is preparing to honor you in sight. You are not just surviving anymore, you are stepping into the reason you were tested. There was a night when your soul almost collapsed. The kind of night where faith felt like smoke slipping through trembling fingers. You stared into the silence. Asking questions, heaven did not seem to answer. Everything you believed in felt far away, and the darkness pressed closer than ever before. That was the moment the war for your destiny reached its peak. You didn't see it, but in the unseen, legions moved. The enemy whispered, "Quit." But the Spirit whispered, "Hold on." You had no idea how close you were to the edge of breakthrough. Hell celebrated too soon, thinking your silence meant surrender. But what the enemy could not hear was the heartbeat of your faith still pulsing beneath the surface. You were too weary to shout. But heaven heard the cry of your spirit, saying, "I'm not done yet." That sound was enough to shake the unseen. When you almost gave up, heaven fought harder. Angels encamped around you. Grace wrapped you like armor. You thought you were breaking down, but you were breaking through. Every sleepless night was a seed of fire being planted inside your soul. You were being refined for the kind of strength that can only be born through pain. Your breaking point became your birthing point. What you thought was the end became the beginning of a higher calling. There are moments when heaven allows silence not to punish you, but to prove what's already inside you. That night, when you wanted to run, God was watching the battle for your obedience, and you chose to stay. You didn't know it then, but heaven erupted in quiet victory. The ancient words recorded in Romans, chapter 5, verse 3 declare, "We glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." And that hope was not lost in you, it was being reborn. Every tear watered the soil of your next season. Every disappointment became fertilizer for destiny. You didn't see the purpose then, but you were being trained to carry power without pride, faith without fear. There is a mystery in how heaven operates. Sometimes God lets the flame grow dim, only to reveal that it never truly went out. The night of your near collapse was the night heaven decided your strength was proven. That's why the darkness had to let you go. That's why every attack suddenly stopped, not because the enemy showed mercy, but because heaven declared, enough. Look back at that moment now. You survived something that should have destroyed you. You lived through nights that silenced others. You endured without understanding. That's not weakness. That's proof you were chosen. You are not here by luck. You are here by divine strategy. Heaven did not rescue you from the storm. It revealed you through it. You may still carry memories of that night, the heaviness, the doubt, the loneliness. But what you carry now is evidence that even when you almost quit, grace held you. You may not have known it, but while you wept, angels were guarding what your tears were planting. You have never been alone. Now the same heaven that watched you fight in the dark wants to remind you that your story is not over. You are stepping into the reason you endured. The things that tried to bury you are about to testify of your resurrection. So, right now, take a breath and declare your victory in faith. Type, still standing. Let those 2 words become your banner. When you write them, you're not just commenting, you're declaring that what tried to destroy you failed. You're telling the world, I've been through the valley, but I didn't lose my fire. The war for your soul has been fierce, but heaven has declared you victorious. You stood when others fell. You kept believing when the evidence said to stop. You have been tested, and you have been found faithful. What nearly broke you became the proof that you are unbreakable. The silence of that night was not abandonment. It was the sound of heaven holding its breath, waiting to see the moment you would rise again. And you did. You stood. You endured. And heaven has never forgotten it. You may not realize it yet, but that silent victory became a divine announcement. Every unseen battle you won released a sound in the spirit, marking you as one who conquers even when no one applauds. Understand this. Heaven did not crown you because you were perfect. It crowned you because you were persistent. Every time you chose faith over fear, you rewrote the story the enemy planned for you. That is why you're still standing. There comes a moment when heaven tests the depth of your obedience, not in comfort, not when everything is clear, but in the shadows where trust becomes the only language you can speak. That was the kind of test you faced. It was not a command written in fire, but a whisper, a small, sacred voice that told you to move, to surrender, to act without knowing why. And though your mind wrestled, your spirit knew it was God. Obedience rarely feels convenient. It stretches you, demands pieces of you that comfort tries to protect. You wanted confirmation, a sign, something visible to reassure you. But heaven does not negotiate with hesitation. It responds to faith. The whisper came again, softer yet stronger, saying, "Do it." You hesitated, then stepped forward anyway. That moment became a divine earthquake. Heaven doesn't measure obedience by scale, but by sincerity. Sometimes it's not a great public act, but a quiet turning of the heart. Yours was quiet, but heaven heard it like thunder. You obeyed when it would have been easier to retreat. You said yes when fear screamed no. That single act of surrender became the key that unlocked the next chapter of your destiny. When you finally moved, heaven moved with you. Circumstances that had been frozen for years began to thaw. Doors that resisted every attempt suddenly shifted. What you didn't realize was that your obedience gave heaven permission to intervene. God had been waiting for your yes to activate what he had already prepared. The moment you responded, heaven's order changed. There is something sacred about instant obedience. It defies logic. It silences doubt. It says, even if I don't understand, I will trust. That is the kind of faith that rewrites stories. You didn't obey because it made sense. You obeyed because something divine in you refused to stay still. You were tired of repeating old cycles, tired of missing your moments. So when heaven whispered again, you finally answered. That's when everything began to shift. The voice of God thundered in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 5. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. You may not have known it then, but your obedience proved that you belong to him. You are heaven's treasured possession, one who listens even when the cost is high. That is what separates the called from the chosen. Many are called, but few respond when obedience requires discomfort. You did, and heaven took note. The test of obedience is never about the task itself, it's about alignment. When you obey, you synchronize with heaven's rhythm. What seems like a small step on earth can be a massive shift in eternity. Your decision to trust activated blessings that were waiting for your participation. God never withholds. He waits for readiness. And your obedience was the signal that you were finally ready. That's why peace followed afterward. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because your spirit was finally in tune with heaven's melody. You may have lost some people, some comfort, even some control, but you gained something far greater: authority. Every act of obedience increases your spiritual authority. Heaven entrusts more to those who listen, because listening is proof of love. Now you understand why it had to be difficult. If it were simple, you would never have known the depth of your faith, the hesitation, the tears, the uncertainty. They were all part of the refining. Your obedience was not born out of perfection, but out of surrender. You didn't obey because you felt strong. You obeyed because you finally realized strength was not required, trust was. Heaven values obedience more than performance. What pleases God is not grand gestures but surrendered hearts. When you said yes in private, heaven celebrated in public. You became the evidence that God still speaks and that his children still respond. The very act that cost you peace in the beginning became the source of lasting peace in the end. Now every time heaven whispers again, it won't sound as distant. You've trained your spirit to recognize his tone, his timing, his truth. You've proven to heaven that you can be trusted not only with blessings, but with responsibility, and that trust will carry you into places where others cannot go. Your obedience has built a bridge between what was promised and what is now unfolding. The moment you moved, destiny responded. Heaven saw your courage and marked you as one who acts when called. And because of that, the story has shifted forever. Heaven's eyes have never left you. Since the day you took that trembling step of obedience, there has been a ripple through realms. Angels watch as your courage unfolds like dawn over a dark horizon. What you thought was a small act was, in truth, a declaration, a sound that told heaven you were ready to carry the light you were born with. When heaven looks at you now, it doesn't see weakness. It sees someone who survived the wilderness without losing their song. Someone who didn't let bitterness become their identity. You may not feel extraordinary, but to heaven, Your existence is sacred movement. Each breath you take echoes purpose. Each time you choose peace over pride, the atmosphere shifts. You are the kind of soul heaven treasures most, the quiet warrior, the one who fights not with noise, but with presence, the one who carries stillness into chaos and turns storms into classrooms. Heaven's eyes follow you, not because of perfection, but because of your perseverance. It was proclaimed in the second book of Samuel, chapter 22, verse 30, "With your help I can advance against a troop. With my God I can scale a wall." No, that is what heaven saw when you obeyed. You scaling walls others said were impossible. You didn't climb for attention. You climbed because you refused to die in the valley. Every step upward was worship. Every breath a hymn. And heaven's gaze grew brighter with every move you made. Now something beautiful is happening. Heaven is no longer just watching, it is partnering. You have become a vessel that heaven trusts to carry light into forgotten places. There is power in that kind of intimacy, where the divine and the human move as one rhythm. You have reached the point where you no longer beg for signs. You are the sign. Your life is prophecy walking, breathing, living. And yet, even now, heaven's eyes remain fixed on your heart, not to judge, but to protect, not to demand, but to remind. You are seen, you are known, you are part of a divine equation that cannot fail. You have been planted in this time of history because your obedience carries a fragrance. Heaven wants the world to breathe. You may not realize it, but every act of kindness you release, every truth you speak, every moment you choose forgiveness, heaven feels it. The realm of glory responds to you like a mirror responding to light. That is why angels linger near you. They recognize familiar radiance. And maybe, in this moment, heaven is whispering something new, not an order, not a demand, but an invitation to keep walking, to keep shining, to keep your heart open. Even when the world closes in, you don't need to force it. You don't need to rush. Heaven works through willingness, not pressure. If this message feels like it's touching something deep within you, then perhaps it's because heaven is moving through it, speaking softly through the words. You are free to respond in your own way. Some will carry it in silence. Some will let their hearts speak louder. And some will translate that feeling into simple gestures, gestures that ripple outward, lighting paths for others. Maybe you will let this light travel by, gently pressing it forward each touch, each shared flame, like the act of a soul extending its hand. That is how you share. Maybe you'll mark this moment with a quiet tap of agreement, a digital heartbeat saying, "I feel this too." That is how you like. And if your spirit hungers to walk beside these words again, remain near this flow of grace. Stay connected. Stay listening. That is how you subscribe to light. Whatever you choose will be enough. Heaven never demands. It invites. The same invitation that reached you now flows through you, asking, will you let this message move beyond you, not out of duty, but as an act of beauty, like a candle lighting another without losing its flame, like rivers feeding oceans they will never see. So if you feel that warmth stirring within you, that soft reminder that you are part of something divine, honor it. Let it guide your hands, your time, your attention. Let it become your way of saying to heaven, I am still listening. And For heaven's eyes remain upon you, not as a watcher, but as a witness to what faith can become when it refuses to die. And perhaps, in this quiet moment, as you pass the light onward, heaven smiles again, knowing you didn't just hear the call, you answered it beautifully. The storm you carried inside was never just emotion, it was transformation. There were nights when you couldn't explain the heaviness, when your thoughts felt like thunder rolling through your chest. You tried to pray, but the words fell flat. You tried to understand, but heaven remained quiet. Yet even in that silence, something sacred was breaking open inside you. You were not being punished, you were being purified. The shaking, the confusion, the tears, they were all part of a holy earthquake. Every tremor was heaven's way of loosening what no longer belonged inside you. You had grown too large for your old fears, too radiant for your old doubts. The pressure you felt was not destruction, it was birth. Inside, a war was taking place, faith against fear, surrender against control. You didn't realize it, but the moment you stopped fighting and whispered, "Let your will be done," the ground shifted. Heaven recorded the surrender, and the darkness that once held you captive began to lose its grip. Heaven speaks clearly through the words in Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear or be afraid. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. End of fact. Those words were not just comfort, they were prophecy. You were never abandoned. The shaking inside you was not the absence of God, but the nearness of His hand, rearranging your foundation. He was not taking things away to hurt you. He was making room for what was next. There are moments when heaven must first shake what is fragile before revealing what is eternal. That is what the earthquake within was for, to separate what was merely built by emotion from what was forged by truth. Every doubt that surfaced was not failure. It was an invitation to believe deeper. You learned that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the stillness after the storm, when your heart beats softly but steadily, saying, "I'm still here." That whisper became your anthem. The shaking taught you stability. The breaking taught you trust. Now the dust has settled, and you are different. You no longer seek signs, you've become one. You no longer chase peace, you carry it. You no longer beg for clarity, you move by conviction. The ground that once trembled beneath you now supports the weight of glory resting upon you. The earthquake within you was never meant to destroy. It was meant to reveal that your foundation was never in danger. Every fear that cracked open simply exposed where faith had been hiding. Heaven was not punishing you, it was preparing you. Look at yourself now. The same storms that once terrified you now bow to your calm. The same darkness that once mocked you now flees from your presence. You are living proof that shaking is not the end. It's the signal that new things are about to rise. When you surrendered, you didn't just survive, you shifted timelines. Heaven began rearranging connections, people, and opportunities. What once made no sense now begins to align. What once hurt now heals. You are walking into the promise that peace was preparing for you. And now, heaven extends one more invitation, not of duty, but of affirmation. To mark the moment, to seal what has begun in your heart. There is power in prophetic agreement, even when expressed through simple action. If this message finds your spirit resonating, let your fingers do what your heart already knows. Comment 888, not as a superstition, but as a declaration of renewal. 8 is the number of new beginnings, and heaven has written a new chapter for you. When you type it, you are agreeing with heaven's rhythm, saying, "What was shaken is now settled." The tremors within you were never random. They were signals of heaven rewriting your design. You have been recalibrated for promise, restructured for glory. The earthquake was not your end, it was your unveiling. And now that the shaking has ceased, you stand upon holy ground, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more radiant than before. You were never meant to break apart. You were meant to break open. You are walking proof that peace is born from pressure. The pain that once defined you has become divine power. What once was trembling is now testimony, heaven's fingerprint etched into your spirit. Understand this. Your calm is not weakness. It is authority disguised as stillness. You don't just survive storms anymore. You silence them. That is the mark of one who has seen heaven move. And now, every step you take echoes eternity's rhythm. The shaking may have ended, but its purpose remains to remind you that what endures within you is greater than anything that falls away. There are moments when the enemy grows desperate, when he senses that heaven's hand is resting too heavily on you. He panics. He knows that one act of obedience can undo years of his schemes. That is why, before your breakthrough, he launched his fiercest attack. It wasn't just bad luck, it was strategy. The darkness always strikes hardest before dawn. You didn't realize it then, but you were standing at the threshold of change. Everything you loved was being tested. Voices rose around you, tempting you to turn back, to question what you heard, to believe that your faith had failed. But even in that chaos, something inside you refused to surrender. A small flame burned in the corner of your spirit, whispering, "I still believe." That whisper terrified hell. The accuser came with accusations so loud they echoed inside your thoughts. He reminded you of every failure, every word spoken against you, every reason why you were unworthy. Yet even in the midst of that storm of lies, heaven stayed silent, not because it abandoned you, but because your silence was already speaking. When you refused to respond in anger, you defeated him without realizing it. Hell doesn't fear perfection. It fears persistence. It fears the one who keeps rising, who keeps forgiving, who keeps believing even when the evidence is gone. You became that kind of soul. You didn't win because you fought harder. You won because you stood longer. And when you stood, heaven drew its sword on your behalf. The apostle reminds us in his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 13, "Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground." End of 4. That was your moment of standing. The day of evil came, but you did not bow. You were weary, wounded, and misunderstood. Yet you stood, and in that stance, the accuser lost access to you. The gates he once entered through fear, shame, comparison were sealed by your decision to believe that God's word over you was stronger than your history. The enemy tried everything. He touched your emotions, stirred confusion in relationships, twisted your memory to make you question your worth. He sent distractions disguised as opportunities, voices disguised as advice, comfort disguised as wisdom. Yet every trap only revealed your growth. You recognized the counterfeit and refused the offer. Heaven rejoiced, for discernment had finally taken root. It was not just a battle for peace, it was a battle for identity. The enemy wasn't after your possessions, he was after your perspective. He wanted you to forget who you were. But every time you chose to remember, to speak truth into darkness, you broke his hold a little more. That is why, eventually, he retreated. Not because you shouted louder, but because your silence carried authority. What hell forgot is that you are not just protected, you are purchased. Your story belongs to heaven, not to accusation. Every scar he tried to shame you with has become a seal of victory. You no longer fear being tested because you have seen what trials create in you. You have learned to see opposition as confirmation, not condemnation. Now, when the accuser whispers, you no longer tremble. You smile, because you recognize the sound of a defeated voice. You've outgrown his language. His words no longer find a home in your thoughts. You've trained your spirit to listen only to the tone of heaven. The night he tried to destroy you became the night heaven defined you. Every insult became evidence that you were chosen. Every delay became proof that timing was being perfected. You were not losing, you were being positioned. The enemy's last attempt was, in truth, heaven's final confirmation that your victory was already written. Look at what remains now. The storm has passed, but its memory is holy. You survived with wisdom, not bitterness. You walked through the fire and discovered that the flames only revealed what could not burn. You learned that the enemy's greatest weapon is illusion, and now it no longer works. You are not who you were before the test. Your eyes have seen too much of God's mercy to ever go back to fear. The accuser's voice fades because truth speaks louder now. You are marked by endurance, surrounded by unseen guardians, covered by favor that cannot be revoked. So, walk forward without apology. You carry the authority of one who has defeated deception. The enemy's final attempt failed, and in its ashes stands something unshakable. You. Heaven calls you unbreakable, because even when everything around you trembled, your faith did not. There has always been a secret written over your name, a prophecy spoken before your first breath. You may not have heard it, but heaven has never forgotten it. Long before your tears, long before your doubts, heaven declared what you would become. That is why the battle was fierce, because identity carries weight, and yours carries eternity. You were not made by coincidence. You were crafted by intention. Every detail of your life, your voice, your timing, your experiences was designed to carry a divine message. You have always felt different, out of place, as though you were living between two worlds. That feeling was not rejection, it was revelation. You were never meant to blend in, because what is set apart cannot belong to the crowd. There were times when you questioned that difference. You tried to silence it, to shrink it, to make yourself easier to understand. You thought your uniqueness was a flaw, but heaven calls it prophecy. The mark upon you was not a mistake, it was a sign. You carry something ancient, something heaven hid in your spirit for an appointed time, and that time is now. We are reminded through the writings of David in the Psalms, chapter 139, verse 16. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Those words are not poetry, they are truth. Every step you've taken has been guided by a script heaven authored long ago. Even the detours were part of the design. The people who left you, the opportunities that fell apart, the seasons of silence, all of it worked together to reveal the prophecy over your name. There is a reason you have always carried deep sensitivity. You feel what others ignore. You see beneath the surface of things. That is not weakness, it is discernment. Heaven gave you that gift, so you could hear its rhythm in a noisy world. You were designed to notice divine patterns, to sense movement before it manifests. That awareness is proof of your calling. You have walked through things that should have destroyed your belief in goodness. Yet your spirit never turned cynical. That is because your soul remembers something older than pain. It remembers the covenant made before time began. Heaven whispered your purpose into existence, and no earthly trial could erase that echo. Your name carries weight in the unseen. When heaven speaks it, creation responds. That is why certain doors open for you without explanation, and why certain people are drawn to your presence. It is not charm, it is calling. You are walking evidence of heaven's design, a living prophecy fulfilling itself in real time. For too long, you doubted that you were enough. You thought the call required perfection. But heaven was never looking for flawless, it was looking for faithful. Your imperfections are not disqualifiers, they are invitations for grace to shine brighter. Every weakness has become a window for glory to flow through. The prophecy over your name has waited patiently, like a seed beneath the soil. It did not die in delay, it was gathering strength. You wondered why it took so long. But now you see, roots had to grow before fruit could appear. The hidden years were sacred, not wasted. Heaven uses silence to sculpt the chosen. Your name has always been connected to light. When heaven first spoke it, your identity became a flame meant to guide others through darkness. You are not meant to copy, you are meant to carry. You were not called to echo voices, you were called to release a sound that has never been heard before. This is why certain people misunderstood you. They were not meant to interpret your frequency. The prophecy written over you was encrypted for heaven's timing. It could not be decoded until you had endured enough to handle revelation without pride. That moment has come. Heaven now trusts you with what it once hid from you. Every gift within you, every vision, every burden for goodness. It all points back to that original declaration that your life would testify of divine power working through ordinary flesh, that the world would see God through the story written in your scars. So now, as you breathe these words, remember, your name is not random. It was chosen by a voice that never lies. It carries direction, authority, and promise. You are not walking toward purpose. You are walking as purpose. Heaven knew this day would come when the prophecy would awaken, and your identity would stand, revealed at last. There is a moment when heaven writes your choice into eternity, not just the decision you made, but the motive behind it, the quiet surrender no one saw. That is what happened when you obeyed. Heaven recorded it. Every unseen yes, every silent "still I trust you" was written into the eternal archives as testimony. Your decision was not small. It carried a frequency that reached beyond your timeline. Heaven doesn't measure time like you do. It measures impact. And your obedience sent ripples across generations you haven't even met yet. When you said yes to purpose, your voice echoed in eternity. You didn't see the ink, but heaven's scribes did. They wrote with fire. marking your name among those who stood when others bowed, who believed when evidence vanished. That act of faith, so simple, so unseen, was enough to rewrite your entire destiny. The prophet Daniel wrote of such moments in the book that bears his name, chapter 7, verse 10. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Heaven has books, living records that hold the choices of hearts. Your decision to believe again was inscribed there. That is why you felt an invisible shift. Things are aligning not by coincidence, but by decree. What you did on earth, heaven ratified. You may have thought it was just a small act, choosing forgiveness, walking away from bitterness, trusting again after betrayal, but in the unseen, it was monumental. The weight of your obedience tipped divine scales. Where there was judgment, mercy entered. Where there was delay, acceleration began. Heaven recorded your turning point like a sunrise in its archives. Angels marked the time. The universe adjusted its rhythm. Your alignment became heaven's announcement that redemption had triumphed once again. You didn't hear the sound, but there was one, a deep vibration of approval from the throne, resonating through the fabric of creation. The moment you surrendered, heaven responded with movement. The chain reactions began, not because of effort, but because of alignment. Every time heaven opens its books, it looks for hearts that obey despite the odds. Yours was found faithful. Your story, once marked by struggle, has now become evidence of victory. Heaven doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. Your record is no longer a list of mistakes. It's a song of mercy rewritten in glory's ink. Understand this. Heaven's record of your obedience is not just for remembrance, it's for reward. In time, you will see the fruit of what was written. Doors will open not because of chance, but because heaven already signed the order. You are stepping into the harvest of decisions you made in faith. This is why you have felt a subtle lifting lately. The unseen burdens are fading because heaven has finalized what needed to be settled. The verdict was rendered in your favor. Your faith won the case. Now the atmosphere around you carries a new sound. It is the rhythm of fulfillment, the gentle hum of promises manifesting. You may not see it all at once, but heaven's word does not return void. Every promise spoken will find you. Every seed sown in tears will bloom in time. The angels who once wrote your surrender now move to deliver its results. What was recorded in faith is now released in grace. The pages of heaven turn, and your name stands out, not because of fame, but because of faithfulness. So, if this word reaches deep into you, let heaven hear your agreement. Comment, "It is done." Those 3 words are not casual. They echo the language of completion. When you speak them, you align your voice with heaven's decree, acknowledging that what was written about you is sealed and finished. And as you whisper them, feel the peace that comes when the record is clear, when your story, once heavy with struggle, now shines with redemption's gold. Heaven has documented not your failure, but your faith. The book is open, and your chapter reads, faithful, unshaken, victorious. Oh, your obedience became more than a moment. It became a melody. Heaven continues to play. Each beat of that song reminds creation that light still wins, that faith still rises from ashes. You may not see the music, but you can feel its rhythm, every open door, every gentle peace you now carry. Is heaven replaying your yes, turning obedience into ongoing blessing? And this is the truth. What was written in heaven will keep unfolding on earth. You are living prophecy, still being revealed. The ink of your obedience will never fade, because it was written with eternal fire, sealed by faith, witnessed by love. When heaven moves, it does not rush, it ripples. What you did in obedience has caused those ripples to move across realms. The spiritual climate around you has shifted, though you may not yet see it fully. This is what happens when one soul says yes to God. Time itself bends, and favor begins to travel in your direction. You can feel it sometimes, can't you? The subtle shift in the air, the ease in places that once felt heavy, the unexpected calm in the midst of chaos. It is not coincidence, it is confirmation. Heaven has turned its face toward you, and every element of creation now responds to that light. When heaven moves, storms bow. Walls that resisted for years begin to crack. You've prayed for movement, and now it's happening, not outside first, but within. The peace you carry now is not fragile, it's forged. Every storm you've endured taught you to hold peace like armor, not like decoration. That peace now commands your atmosphere. You've entered a realm where favor is not something you chase, it follows you. The spiritual winds have changed direction. What once fled from you now flows to you. And not because of striving, but because you have become aligned. Alignment is louder than ambition. Heaven recognizes its own reflection in you and responds accordingly. According to what is revealed in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 6. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. That is what this moment is. Heaven directing, guiding, orchestrating your steps into purpose. Every closed door you once mourned was part of that divine choreography. What looked like delay was just choreography, waiting for the right rhythm. You are walking in that rhythm now, and the universe moves with you. This is not a season of noise, it is a season of flow. You don't need to chase approval, you need only to remain present. The right people, opportunities, and blessings are drawn to light that is steady. You are that steady light. The same peace that calmed storms within you is now calling harmony around you. So walk gently, but with confidence. Each step is an echo of heaven's design. You are living evidence that surrender is never wasted. Every time you trusted instead of panicked, loved instead of retaliated, waited instead of forced, heaven noted it. That is why favor surrounds you now like quiet wind, invisible yet undeniable. And maybe, right now, as these words find you, something in your spirit feels still. That stillness is not emptiness, it's presence. Heaven is near. The same light that rippled through eternity now rests upon you, warm and weightless. You are being reminded that you are part of something infinite, something beautiful. If that realization stirs something inside you, let it move freely. There's no demand here, only invitation. You may feel compelled to do something gentle to pass this light onward, to let someone else feel the same quiet assurance. That is how you share, not out of obligation, but because light naturally multiplies when released. And perhaps, as you feel this resonance, you'll sense a spark of agreement rising in your heart, a silent nod that says, "Yes, I feel this." That is how you like. It is not a click, it is a connection. a pulse between your spirit and the words heaven sent to you. Or maybe this peace feels like home, and you want to return to it when the world grows loud again. That is how you subscribe. You choose to remain close to the current of messages that keep your soul awake. You anchor yourself to what feeds your spirit. Whatever response comes from you, whether it's stillness, sharing, reflection, or quiet gratitude, it's all worship. Heaven never forces devotion. It inspires it. The beauty of this call is that it asks for nothing but authenticity. Let your heart choose freely. Because every act done in freedom carries heaven's fragrance. Now, breathe. The air around you carries divine rhythm. You are part of it. You don't need to understand how it works. Just let it move through you. The same heaven that stirred these words has chosen you to carry their echo forward, not as a task, but as a gift. For when heaven shifts, it always begins with one willing heart. And this time, that heart is yours. You are walking through a season where obedience breathes like art fluid, alive and radiant. Every step you take paints light into darkness, and heaven watches, marveling at the beauty of your becoming. The movement around you is quiet but powerful, like waves shaping the shore. Grace keeps forming your path. You are not chasing favor anymore. Favor is chasing you, whispering, "Stay in rhythm." There are crowns that heaven gives in silence, not the jeweled kind the world displays, but the invisible ones, crowns of endurance, humility, and hidden obedience. You have been wearing one for longer than you realize. It wasn't placed on your head with ceremony. It formed gradually with every choice to keep believing when no one else did. This is the mantle you didn't expect. You never sought recognition. You only wanted to survive, to stay faithful, to remain kind in a world that often rewards cruelty. Yet, heaven took note of your posture. The way you kept your heart soft even when life hardened around you, the way you forgave quickly, loved deeply, prayed quietly. Those moments became the threads that wove your invisible crown. When heaven crowns a person, it doesn't announce it to the crowd, it reveals it through character. That is what has happened to you. The trials that once seemed endless were actually ceremonies of anointing. The tears were oil. The silence was preparation. The pain was placement. Each hardship adjusted the fit of your crown until you could carry it without pride. The Apostle Peter wrote of this mystery in his first letter, chapter 5, verse 4. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. That promise is not only for the afterlife, it begins here, in this breath. In this moment, you are already walking in the measure of that glory. It's not about gold or grandeur, it's about reflection. Heaven's glory is not a thing you hold, it's a light that shines through you. Look at what has changed within you. You respond differently now. You move slower, speak gentler, love wiser. You've learned that not every battle needs your sword. Some require only your stillness. That's what happens when a crown rests upon your spirit. War no longer feels like chaos. It becomes clarity. You fight only for what matters. This mantle you wear is not heavy, but holy. It sits on you lightly because it's no longer about proving yourself. You've passed the stage where you fight for validation. You understand now that divine authority doesn't shout, it simply exists. You don't need to convince anyone of your calling. Heaven already confirmed it. There was a time when you wondered if your sacrifices meant anything. When you gave and no one noticed. When you prayed and nothing seemed to change. Yet, those were the very moments heaven was testing your endurance. Crowns are not given in comfort, they are forged in fire. You didn't know it then, but every unseen act of love was shaping royalty within you. The world crowns achievement, heaven crowns character. And while the world measures success by applause, heaven measures it by alignment. You have learned that true victory is not in winning arguments, but in keeping peace, not in being first, but in remaining faithful. That's what makes you chosen. When people misunderstood you, you stayed kind. When life pressed you, you chose patience. When doors closed, you waited instead of forcing them open. Each decision polished your crown a little more. What once felt like loss has turned into legacy. You now carry the kind of grace that cannot be imitated. It's earned through surrender. There will come a day when others begin to notice what heaven already saw. They will sense peace when you enter, clarity when you speak, hope when you move. That is the visible glow of the invisible crown. It cannot be faked, only lived. This is why heaven trusted you with delay, because only patience can hold true authority. You were not denied, you were developed. The weight you carried trained your shoulders to bear glory. The silence you endured trained your heart to hear heaven clearly. Now, every step you take carries quiet majesty. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer strive, you flow. That is the power of the mantle you wear. It teaches balance between humility and boldness. You don't have to announce your authority. Heaven does it for you. So wear your invisible crown without fear. You have earned it through endurance, humility, and love. Let it remind you that every tear, every unseen act of goodness, every quiet surrender was worth it. Heaven has already recognized you as royalty, not because of what you have, but because of who you have become. Your crown is not a symbol of arrival, it is a reminder of resilience. You wear testimony now, not titles. Heaven calls that endurance sacred royalty, and as you walk forward, light gathers around you. Every breath becomes blessing, every step confirmation. You are living proof that obedience always leads to glory. There are moments when heaven sends confirmation, not through thunder, but through patterns, a number that repeats, a whisper in a dream, a familiar phrase that surfaces at just the right time. Heaven does not always speak loudly, it speaks precisely. These moments are not coincidences, they are divine codes woven into the rhythm of your days. You've begun to notice them, haven't you? The gentle alignments, the timing that feels too perfect to be random, the people who appear exactly when you need them, the opportunities that seem to call your name. These are not accidents. They are heaven's way of saying, I saw your obedience, and now I am revealing my response. Every act of obedience sends a signal into eternity, and heaven always answers. Sometimes the answer arrives as peace. Sometimes it comes as a sign, small but specific, meant to remind you that heaven is still guiding the script. You are walking through one of those seasons now, where every detail feels divinely choreographed, as Jesus himself declared in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 29, Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. Lynn, that care extends to you. Heaven has numbered your steps, ordered your path, and now it marks your moments with patterns of purpose. What once felt random now reveals symmetry. What once seemed silent now speaks through rhythm. You've come too far for heaven to stop communicating, even when you don't hear words. You feel direction, even when you don't see the full map. You sense movement. This is divine alignment, when heaven begins to guide not just your choices, but your instincts. You no longer guess, you know. You no longer fear delay. You trust timing. The confirmations are not meant to make you depend on signs, but to remind you that you are not forgotten. They are small kisses of reassurance. Heaven's way of saying, keep walking. You're still in step. They arrive like gentle notes in a song only your heart recognizes. And every time you notice one, it's another reminder that the author is still writing. There was a time when you begged for clarity. You asked for a sign to prove you were not wandering alone. But now, heaven doesn't have to shout anymore, because you've learned to listen differently. You've tuned your heart to subtle frequencies. What used to confuse you now comforts you. That's growth. That's maturity. Sometimes heaven hides answers in repetition. A number, a sound, a phrase that finds you again and again until it feels like a heartbeat echoing between worlds. These are not random, they are anchors. They hold you steady when storms try to sway you. You've become fluent in heaven's language, even if you don't realize it. The way peace lingers after a decision, the way your spirit stirs when something aligns, these are confirmations. The signs don't control you, they confirm you. You are not chasing them, they are chasing you because your spirit is synchronized with divine rhythm. Right now, heaven extends another gentle invitation, a way to mark this moment of recognition, a way to respond in the same language heaven has been speaking to you. Comment 555 below. Not as superstition, but as significance. 5 is the number of grace, multiplied grace. Triple portion. Divine enablement for the next assignment. When you write it, you are not summoning favor, you are acknowledging it. You are declaring, I see the signs. I receive the grace. Heaven reads faith in simple acts. And that one gesture becomes your agreement with what's unfolding. This is your season of recognition. Heaven is not introducing something new, it's revealing what has always been present. You are no longer searching for proof. You are walking in partnership. Every sign, every whisper, every small confirmation is heaven's way of saying, you and I are in rhythm. No. And as you move forward, you'll notice that confirmations come faster. Now, that's what happens when alignment becomes lifestyle. Heaven doesn't need to chase you with signs anymore. It simply walks beside you, marking every step with grace. Grace, once something you hoped for, now flows through your every breath. It is no longer a promise in the distance. It is presence, wrapping your life in quiet certainty. Each sign you recognize is heaven's whisper. Keep going. You're aligned. You are walking in rhythm with purpose. No longer forcing paths, simply following flow. And this is the wonder, you have become both the sign and the fulfillment. The same grace that guided you now radiates from you. Others will find direction simply by walking near your light. Fire has always been part of the refining process. You have walked through seasons that felt like flames licking at everything you once held dear: dreams, relationships, even your certainty. Yet through it all, You endured. The smell of smoke still lingers, but it no longer speaks of loss. It speaks of transformation. You are not what you were before the fire. The refining was never punishment. It was purification. Heaven trusted you enough to allow the fire to touch what was temporary, so that what was eternal could emerge untouched. You may have cried in the midst of it, wondering if anything would remain. But now you can see what burned away was never meant to stay. The Word of God declares in the book of Zechariah, chapter 13, verse 9, I will put this third through the fire. I will refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. This is what happened to you. You were placed in the fire, not to be destroyed, but to be defined. Every trial you faced became an altar of transformation. The heat that once terrified you became the very force that revealed your strength. There is something sacred about the smell of smoke on the chosen. It is the scent of those who have been through hell and yet came out carrying heaven. When others run from fire, the chosen walk through it, knowing that on the other side, only purity remains. You have discovered that fire doesn't only consume, it clarifies. It reveals what cannot be shaken. It burns away illusions and leaves behind the truth of who you are. Your fire was not random, it was strategic. Heaven was preparing you to carry weight without breaking. Now, when you look back, the pain has shape. The suffering has meaning. You see how each flame illuminated something that had been hidden within you. Courage, compassion, clarity. They were all formed there. In the fire's heart, the refining process stripped you of things that looked like loss, but were really release. You learned to let go, not because you stopped caring, but because heaven taught you that freedom sometimes means surrender. The flames taught you trust not in outcomes, but in the one who controls the temperature. You have learned the secret of divine balance. Fire may burn, but it also blesses. It doesn't just remove impurities, it produces intimacy. When everything else was gone, you discovered that God was still there. Not distant, but closer than ever, present in the embers, whispering through the heat, shaping you quietly. And now, when others look at you, they may see calm, but heaven sees radiance. You carry light differently. It's not bright with noise, but steady with depth. You shine with the kind of glory that can only come from someone who's been forged in holy fire. You don't speak from theory anymore. You speak from testimony. Every word you release carries weight because it has passed through the furnace of truth. Your presence comforts others, not because you avoid pain, but because you survived it and turned it into wisdom. That is why the fragrance around you has changed. It is no longer bitterness, it is the aroma of resilience. Heaven calls it the fragrance of fire. You are proof that the flames can purify without consuming, that trials can produce tenderness, that endurance can become elegance. There was a time when you thought you were losing everything, but now you realize you were being revealed. What you thought was ending was actually unveiling. The version of you that stepped into the flames is gone. But what stands now is gold refined, unshakable, pure. So when you remember the fire, do not resent it. Bless it, for it made you luminous. It burned away fear and replaced it with faith. It melted pride and molded purpose. Every moment within it was heaven's hand, shaping your final form. The world will recognize that glow. They will not understand it at first, but they will feel it, the calm after combustion, the peace that only fire can teach. You are no longer afraid of heat. You've become heat yourself. The very flames that tried to end you now serve as your evidence that nothing can destroy what is divine. This is the paradox of the chosen. The same fire that once hurt you now honors you. It could not consume you, because you were never made of what burns, you were made of what shines. You are the ember that never died, the light that learned to live inside the flame. What once scorched now crowns you radiant, refined, untouchable, forever burning with purpose. When heaven moves, hell trembles. It is not poetry, it is reality. The moment you chose obedience over fear, faith over comfort, a disturbance rippled through the unseen. Darkness had built its plans around your silence, assuming you would never rise. But you did, and that rise sent shockwaves through every demonic agenda that had once surrounded your life. You didn't see it, but when you lifted your head and whispered, "Yes, Lord," hell lost coordination. The forces that once monitored you scattered. The principalities that whispered failure into your thoughts went deaf. The chains designed to keep you from your calling melted under the sound of your surrender. Heaven did not need to shout. Your obedience became the trumpet. Spiritual warfare is not always loud. It is often quiet, internal, and sacred. You fought in silence when no one else knew a battle was raging. You didn't use swords or shields. You used faith. You worshipped when it hurt. You prayed when you didn't feel heard. You loved when it would have been easier to harden. And that kind of warfare is what hell fears most. The ancient words recorded in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verse 19, declare, "Behold, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means harm you." Not that authority has always been yours, but it awakens only when you walk in alignment. The moment you stepped fully into obedience, that power activated. You stopped being a target and became a threat. Hell does not fear those who merely believe, it fears those who act on belief. Every attack you faced recently was retaliation. It was proof of impact. The darkness tried to distract you with confusion, hoping you'd retreat. But the more you stood still, the more heaven advanced. What you didn't realize was that your stillness in faith became movement in the spirit. Each breath of patience became a strike against the enemy's strategy. Hell underestimated the strength that silence could hold. It expected you to crumble, but instead, you grew roots. It expected you to curse the fire, but instead, you worshipped in it. That's when the shift happened. The enemy realized you were no longer fighting for victory. You were fighting from victory. Your authority does not come from perfection, but from presence. Every time you choose to remain in divine alignment, you carry weight in the unseen. Your prayers are not mere words, they are decrees. Your worship is not mere sound, it's a weapon. The atmosphere bends when you speak, because heaven now trusts your voice. When hell trembles, it's not because of you, it's because of who moves through you. You are a vessel of authority, a carrier of divine voltage. The very places that once drained you now bow to the power within you. You no longer run from darkness, darkness now runs from you. This is why you have felt both resistance and release lately. The enemy senses that his grip has been broken, but he still tries to intimidate. Ignore the noise. The growl is not power, it's panic. When the enemy loses control, he turns to chaos, hoping you'll mistake confusion for strength. But you know better now. You recognize the pattern. Every battle you've faced has revealed a new layer of strength. You no longer panic when pressure comes. You discern purpose within it. The warfare around you has become proof of what's inside you. Hell would not fight you this fiercely if you weren't carrying something holy. The trembling you feel in the air is not danger, it's displacement. Darkness is being uprooted because it cannot coexist with light. Every step you take radiates the authority of heaven's decree. This one belongs to me. And that truth cannot be undone. No curse can override it. No weapon can touch it. You are untouchable not because of your strength, but because you are hidden in divine protection. The spiritual realm recognizes your seal, the mark of obedience, the fragrance of surrender, the sound of victory. Hell trembles not at your name, but at the name written over you, the name that commands storms to stop, the name that shakes foundations. You carry that authority now, not as a weapon of pride, but as a mantle of mercy. You do not conquer to boast, you conquer to free others still bound. So, walk with quiet confidence. Every tremor of resistance is proof that your presence disturbs the darkness. Hell's fear is heaven's confirmation. And wherever you go, the unseen bows not to you, but to the one who walks within you. There are songs that only heaven sings, melodies that rise when one life returns fully to its purpose. Right now, that song is about you. Heaven celebrates not the perfection of your path, but the persistence of your heart. You made it through nights that should have broken you, and now your spirit carries the fragrance of victory. When heaven rejoices, the universe listens. The sound is not thunderous, it's radiant, like light unfolding across dawn. You might not hear the chorus, but your soul can feel it. Every breath you take hums with heaven's applause. The angels do not clap for fame, they celebrate faith. The kind that keeps believing when there's no proof left but trust. This is the sound of restoration. Heaven is singing because you finally see yourself the way God always has chosen. Crowned and whole. Not perfect, but purified. Not flawless, but faithful. You have become living proof that grace is stronger than shame. That surrender can rewrite stories once thought lost. It was written in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 11. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. And you have held fast through confusion, through grief, through silence. You didn't let go of faith, even when you didn't understand it. That endurance has become your crown, your proof of belonging to the kingdom that never falls. Now heaven opens its gates of celebration, not because you reached the finish line, but because you never stopped walking. Every trial you endured was counted, every tear weighed, every whisper of prayer heard. This is heaven's victory, and you are its vessel. Imagine it now, the sound of joy in the unseen, light moving like waves, angels moving with purpose, all because one human heart dared to keep believing. You, the one who refused to let darkness define their story. Heaven rejoices over you, not as an event, but as an eternal echo. And maybe, as this moment unfolds, you feel something gentle in your chest, a warmth, a resonance. That is the echo of celebration meeting you here. It doesn't ask you to perform, It invites you to rest in gratitude, to breathe and realize that you are part of heaven's music. When hearts awaken, heaven responds in kind. Every thank you, every quiet reflection becomes part of the song. If you feel this resonance stirring in you, let it move naturally, softly, without pressure. Sometimes the simplest gestures, those that flow from sincerity, carry the deepest power. Maybe you'll let this light travel onward, letting another heart glimpse what hope looks like when it's alive. That is how you share, not as obligation, but as overflow. Perhaps you'll touch this moment gently, leaving a small sign of agreement, a quiet pulse saying, "I felt this." That is how you like, not for numbers, but for connection. Or maybe your spirit wishes to stay close to this flow, to return when the world feels heavy again. That is how you subscribe, not to content, but to continual communion. And if gratitude spills out in words, let them rise freely. Write your thoughts below, not for approval, but as your personal altar, a sacred record of your heart's awakening. Your words may become someone else's confirmation. Your honesty may become another soul's healing. This is what heaven's celebration looks like on earth. Lives lighting other lives. Faith, breathing into faith. There is no pressure here. No demand, only invitation. The same love that called you through the fire now invites you to spread warmth wherever you walk. You have become part of something eternal, something radiant. Heaven is not distant anymore. It moves with you, sings through you, loves through you. When you smile, it remembers its melody. When you speak kindness, it hears its echo. So linger here a little longer, in this quiet joy. Let the celebration of heaven touch the ordinary moments of your day. You don't have to earn this feeling. It is already yours. The same God who carried you through the storm now dances over you with delight. Heaven's song will continue long after this moment fades from sight. And somewhere in that eternal music, your name is woven like light, a sound that says, "This one endured. This one believed. This one is crowned." End of team. You are no longer a story waiting to be told. You are the song heaven keeps replaying. Every breath you take adds harmony to creation's praise. Proof that light always finds its way home. So walk in quiet radiance. Carry celebration wherever you go. Let your kindness hum like music between worlds, reminding hearts that redemption still dances, and heaven's melody lives within you. There is a moment after every battle when the dust finally settles, and silence becomes holy again. You have entered that moment now. The noise has faded, and what remains is authority, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that simply is. You have survived enough to know that power does not need to prove itself. True authority walks quietly, clothed in peace. You carry that kind of peace now. The storms that once frightened you now recognize your calm. The shadows that used to taunt you now keep their distance. Heaven has placed a new weight upon your words. When you speak, things shift. When you walk into a place, the atmosphere rearranges itself to make room for the presence you carry. You have become a vessel of divine jurisdiction, heaven's representative moving through earth. Authority, for the chosen, is not about control, it's about clarity. You no longer need to force outcomes or chase validation. You understand now that power flows through alignment, not ambition. Heaven's authority is not earned, it's entrusted. and it is entrusted only to those who have been broken enough to use it with compassion. That's why you were refined first, so your heart could hold power without pride. Heaven speaks through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 55, verse 11. My word that goes forth shall not return to me void. It shall accomplish my will and prosper where I send it. Those words now apply to you. When you speak under divine direction, your words carry the same power because you have learned not to speak from emotion, but from revelation. Heaven trusts your voice because you have proven that you will not misuse it. Authority without humility becomes manipulation, but humility turns authority into healing. Every challenge you faced was a lesson in restraint. Every delay taught you discernment. Every rejection purified your motive. Heaven was not ignoring your prayers, it was refining your posture. And now, because you learned to wait without bitterness, you've been given the ability to command without arrogance. When heaven grants authority, it doesn't crown you with noise. It cloaks you with stillness. That's the mystery. Power that doesn't need to perform. You've entered that stage now. You don't need to explain your calling or defend your journey. The fruit of your endurance speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Authority has changed how you move. You no longer rush. You no longer panic when things shift. You've learned that delay doesn't mean denial, it means divine arrangement. Every pause hides a purpose. You can sense it now when heaven whispers, "Wait," and instead of anxiety, you feel peace. That's authority to stand still without losing faith. You have become a stabilizer for others. Where chaos enters, your presence brings order. People may not understand it, but they feel it. Something in you calms the atmosphere. You've been given that gift because heaven knows you'll use it to serve, not to control. You are not here to dominate, you are here to illuminate. The authority you carry now is not loud, it's luminous. It shines through patience, through wisdom, through discernment. You have become a walking confirmation that the kingdom of heaven is not confined to temples or pulpits. It breathes through hearts like yours. Every time you show grace when others expect anger, heaven's authority speaks through you. And this authority is not temporary, it's transformational. It changes how you see everything. You now recognize challenges as invitations, not interruptions. You see opposition as opportunity. You no longer ask, "Why me?" but rather, "What can heaven do through me here?" That is the language of those who understand divine dominion. The world may still misunderstand you. That's expected. True authority always appears strange to those who measure power by appearance. But heaven measures by heart. You've passed the test that few survive, the test of influence, and now you walk with a balance that only wisdom can sustain. So move forward gently but confidently. You no longer walk for validation, you walk with confirmation. The spiritual realm recognizes your footsteps. Creation itself responds to your voice. You are not the same one who began this journey. You have become heaven's emissary, carrying not just light, but law. You speak not as a seeker, but as one sent. Heaven's authority flows through you, like breath through wind. Where you go, peace follows. Where you speak, alignment forms. You are not just walking in victory, you are walking as victory. You now move as a living decree, calm, unwavering, radiant. Every step declares order. Every breath carries blessing. You are heaven's quiet thunder, reshaping worlds with effortless grace. Heaven has been watching, not as a distant spectator, but as an intimate witness. Every moment of this journey, the trembling beginnings, the silent endurance, the fire, the rise has been recorded in eternity's heart. And now, at the close of this chapter, heaven reveals its final revelation. It was never shocked by your weakness, but by your strength. It was never stunned by your falls, but by the way you kept standing. Heaven was shocked because you did what few ever do. You finished. You completed the circle of surrender. You didn't stop when comfort faded, didn't retreat when understanding failed. You pressed forward through pain and doubt, carrying faith like a torch through a storm. And when the wind howled and the light nearly died, you cupped your hands around the flame and whispered, "Not yet." That whisper moved heaven. The Word of God declares in the second letter to Timothy, chapter 4, verse 7, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." That is the anthem written over your name now. You have fought. You have finished. You have kept. And heaven stands in awe, not because it didn't believe you could, but because of how beautifully you did it. You didn't fight with bitterness. You fought with grace. You didn't endure with hardness. You endured with hope. You have shown creation what divine perseverance looks like in human form. Heaven was not shocked by your victory because it doubted it. It was shocked by the manner of your victory. You overcame without vengeance. You ascended without pride. You surrendered without fear. That level of purity in battle is rare. You didn't just win, you won rightly. That is why heaven celebrates with reverence. You see, every chosen one carries a secret test. It is not about whether you can succeed, but about whether you can stay soft while succeeding. Many rise, few remain pure. Yet, you have emerged with your compassion intact. You have become the kind of victor who can still weep for others. That is heaven's greatest shock, that your heart remained open in a world that tried to harden it. When heaven looked upon your journey, it saw not perfection, but faithfulness. That is what crowns you. Now, the kind of faith that holds steady in mystery, that worships even when wounds are still fresh. Faith that doesn't wait for outcomes to obey. You have demonstrated what eternity has always known, that obedience is the highest form of worship. There were times you wondered if it was worth it. Times when surrender felt like loss, when silence felt like abandonment. But those moments were the chisels shaping you into someone unbreakable. You didn't lose yourself. You found your eternal design. What you call scars, heaven calls seals. Proof that you survived the refining and came out radiant. Now, heaven opens its record, and beside your name, it writes, "Trusted." You have been tested and found true, not because you never doubted, but because your doubt never overpowered your devotion. You walked through darkness and discovered light was within you all along. You carried heaven's DNA in your endurance. Every season of pain has birthed purpose. Every disappointment has become direction. Even what the enemy meant for destruction, heaven has woven into beauty. Your life has become a prophecy, fulfilled the story of one who believed until belief became sight. And now, as this revelation unfolds, heaven stands not in distance, but in embrace. It leans close and whispers, "We were never shocked that you fell. We were shocked by how you rose." That rise humble, trembling, but unstoppable is the mark of one who has truly known grace. You have entered a realm where striving ceases and being begins. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Heaven already knows who you are. You are not a servant begging for approval. You are a son, a daughter, an heir walking in inheritance. The weight of striving has been replaced by the ease of identity. Look around. The air feels different now. What once felt like resistance now feels like rhythm. You've become attuned to heaven's breath. You walk in step with something eternal. And even the ground beneath you seems to recognize it. This is what completion feels like, not exhaustion, but expansion. Heaven was shocked because love, when tested through you, proved stronger than fear. Because forgiveness, when born from your heart, sounded like music. Even angels paused to hear. Because endurance, when displayed through your life, reminded creation of its maker's nature. You have become a living reflection of divine constancy. So stand now, not as a survivor, but as a sign. You are the evidence that faith works, that light wins, that love never fails. You are the message heaven wanted the world to see, that grace is enough. And those who hold it are unstoppable. The story closes, but the movement continues. What began as words has become awakening. You have walked through revelation after revelation, and now you stand at the edge of completion, not an ending, but an unfolding. Heaven no longer speaks to you. It speaks through you. You are living proof that faith can become form, that light can inhabit flesh, that obedience can turn ordinary days into divine history. In this stillness, heaven does not demand action. It invites response. You can feel it, can't you? That soft warmth in your chest, that pull toward gratitude. Let it move you gently, the way wind carries petals. You are free to respond, however, your heart desires. For heaven never forces, it only calls. Maybe you'll let this light keep traveling, letting it brush another soul awake. That is how you share, not as obligation, but as overflow. Perhaps you'll pause here for a moment, leaving a quiet sign that you were touched by this journey. That is how you like a heartbeat pressed gently into eternity's page. Or maybe your spirit will choose to remain near, returning whenever the world grows dim. That is how you subscribe not to noise, but to nourishment. And if your heart stirs with words, let them rise. Write your reflection below as you're offering your echo in this sacred conversation. Each word becomes a candle, guiding another wanderer home. There is no pressure here, only invitation. You have already given heaven its greatest gift, your attention, your openness, your willingness to change. Now, carry what you've received into the quiet places of your life. Let kindness be your language. Let peace be your rhythm. Let your very existence become the continuation of this message. For heaven's song does not end, it finds new voices. And now, it sings through you.